I am so excited that you came back today to join me for day 2 of the 15 Minutes to Quilt Challenge. I hope that you sew along with me while I work on my project. Today I'm going to work on putting the finishing touches on a quilt that I started earlier this year. I just have to put on the binding and also add a label. So in my 15 minutes today, I thought I would just work on the label and show you how I make labels for my quilts. The quilt that I'm working on is a Bona Lisa quilt that I worked on in October. I hope that you get a chance to sew along with me while I show you this label. So adding labels to a quilt can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. The quilt label is usually on the bottom left-hand corner of the quilt, of the front of the quilt. So when you put it on the quilt, you want to put it on the bottom right corner. And there's different ways that you can handle it. What you can do is to just make a rectangular piece. This one is a little bit big, but you would put it against the corner, the bottom right corner of the back of the quilt. Sew it down when you're sewing down the binding. You can either just baste it in first, like maybe go 1/8 of an inch in to baste it in before you put the binding, or you can just try to pin it down and then put it down and sew it down at the same time as you put in the binding, whatever works for you. And what that would mean then is that 2 of your sides are already done. You don't have to sew them again. And then you can just hand stitch these down, these corners down. You can either just use a fold of the fabric, or you can fold it down yourself to make sure that this edge is secure. Another way you can do it is to take your fabric and fold it diagonally. And when you have a diagonal fold like this, you can sew the raw edges into the quilt like this. You won't see this part. So this would be the raw edge, and this would be a raw edge. And if you sew it down at the same time that you're sewing the binding, then it's already done for you. You can just, and it's optional for you whether you want to sew this part down by hand, or you can just leave it raw depending on how big it is. It's because it's not a raw edge, it'll be fine either way. Although if you're using it, say, as a blanket or something, somebody might get their foot caught in here. So you don't want to use this method for a baby blanket. One thing that I like to do is to put the 2 corners, one on each side of the top of the quilt. And if you put it on the top, you can also use the triangles to secure the dowel rod to hold up the quilt. So it's a good way to create a method for hanging without having to create a separate hanging sleeve. Today I thought I'd just make my label a little bit more interesting than just a plain label with my name and date on it. Usually I always make sure that I put my name, the city and state, and the date that I finished it, so that there's some information on the quilt about some record of what the quilt is all about. I do think that I should start writing down the name of the quilt. It is something that would also, I think, be important, is to put the name of the quilt on it, so that if you're talking about a particular quilt, then at least people would know that it's the same quilt that you're discussing. What I did is I was looking for this fabric. I think this fabric would be a nice light color, but it's not big enough. So what I did was I found some other fabric that we had used on the front. So we just found this white fabric that was fused. And then what I also did, because there's not a lot of variety here in what we used in the front, and because I didn't want to look that hard for the fabric, is I got out my box of fused fabric scraps. Anytime that I have extras like this, I just go ahead and put them in this box, and that way I have it available for future use. There's just other things here that are fused. There's some white fabric that's fused, extra fusible. Most of this is scraps of fabric that have already been fused. And what I dug out of here is some gray fabric. I think gray would work well for this quilt. And also I got out some brown and some black. Not really sure what I'm going to do with this yet, but I think that these little pieces may just be interesting to come up with some use for these pieces for the label. So I think one of the biggest things is, like, this would be a great place for me to write down the information about my quilt, and I could also use it as a moon. I'm going to just make this a little narrower here, and that makes it a little bit more moon shaped to me. And I'll leave it almost a full moon. I'll go ahead and leave it as a 3/4 moon so that it has enough room for a label for me to write down my information. I want to make sure I put this far enough in so that when I fold down the edges, I'll have a space in here. So I'm trying to think of what else I want in here. Maybe a house. Didn't put a house in the front of the quilt, but I guess I could just put it on the back. Okay, so if I had this, then I would need a roof. I guess this could be a roof. And maybe make it a pretty big roof, but I don't really have a lot of other things to add to it, so it'll be fine. Maybe a darker one for the door. It's gonna be a pretty small door though. It's all right. It is what it is. It actually looks like a tree, doesn't it? Like a tree trunk. Well, how about this one? This one can be a door. Yeah, this one's bigger. There's our door. And then maybe we'll just have a door and a window. Here, I can make windows out of this one. That way you can have 2 windows. So we can put the door in the center and then have 2 windows. I think the windows need to be a little smaller. And the nice thing about this is since this is a Halloween quilt, everything can be crooked. It doesn't have to be straight. So any excuse that I can to make things easy for myself, I'm going to take it. Okay, so there's a house, a tree. Maybe I need something green to make a tree. Actually, I have this fabric, but this fabric isn't fused. Let's see if I have any green in here. It's not very fused. Perfect, okay. Okay, so we have this, which is not fused, but I think it'll still work okay. We could add some little branches. I thought this was a different color, but it is not. There's some green here, but it's not very big. I don't know what I could do with that. Lost my windows again. There they are. Okay. And actually this is nice because I can write the label right here on the gray fabric. There, I could add this one so it doesn't look so straight with the bottom. Like that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do for this, is to just go ahead and peel off this fusible paper. I can go ahead and secure these pieces down, add my name and address, add my name, the city and state, and the date that I'm finishing it, which hopefully will be today, and then which hopefully will be this month. Wonder if I want to keep this crooked. This on the bottom. This one's already peeled off, and this one needs peeling. So what I'll do is I'll press this down, and then I will secure it first onto the label fabric, and then when I'm adding the binding, I will add the binding. I'll add the 2 corners of the binding here, and then I'll just make sure I fold these down when I'm pressing so that I can secure these corners. I'm going to have to hand stitch this down, and even though it's a lot, I think it'll be worth the effort just to make this quilt worth looking at. I think it's a nice treat to give to people for like a reward for looking at the quilt more closely. I've set everything up on my ironing board. I have trimmed off the selvage here so they won't be in the way. I'm going to just sew these 2 in. So I want to fold down these parts about 1/4 of an inch. And then this one about 1/4 of an inch. Sticking to my shirt. Don't do that. I think this will be far enough away from the edge then. And this one too. Will be far enough away from the edge. I'm going to press all this down. I think it's close enough to where it should be. Not all of these pieces have fusible on them, the green doesn't. But I think pressing it will just help secure it with static and give me a good idea where it should be. I made the house higher than the tree, but that's okay. And then I'm going to press the top and the sides. that it's not the same. And I'm hand stitching this down anyway, so I'm fine with it that it's not perfectly straight. It's a lovely little house scene, and then I can just put my information here. And if I wanted to, I could add some information here as well. And while the iron is on, I can go ahead and press the binding. I haven't sewed it together yet, but I think I'll be able to sew it just fine after it's been pressed in half. I've set up the ironing board on the dining table instead of on the folding table, since this is where the camera is, and actually it seems to work pretty well. The wire is in the way, but the dog is outside, so I don't have to worry about that. And even though I made really quick decisions about what to put on the label, I think it definitely just adds a little bit more specialness to it. And it really didn't take me hardly any time to make that decision. Didn't take very long to make the label something more. Just to give the label a little bit more than what it would have if I just added the name and the date with the little corner triangle. I think it's worth taking that special effort from time to time. Okay, well, my 15 minutes are up. So I was able to make a label and press some binding strips for my Bona Lisa quilt today. You can enter to win prizes in this challenge. There are 2 ways you can do that. The first is to sew for 15 minutes a day. And if you sewed for 15 minutes today, just put a note in the comment box to let me know what you worked on, and you will get an entry in the drawing. The second way that you can win an entry is just to watch my video. And if you watch the video, all you have to do is to leave a comment about something that happened in the video today, and you'll get another entry in the drawing. I'm really excited about the prizes this year because it's going to be a book that I wrote especially for you, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. We're still working on the final touches on it, and I'll let you know more about that as soon as I can. And don't forget that we have a Facebook page where you can show pictures of what you're working on. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your support, and I'll see you again tomorrow.